We need to talk about the stereotype that autistic people have no empathy, because that's one of the barriers that I faced when self-diagnosing. As a highly sensitive person, I struggle with hyper-empathy, and I have my entire life. I can be debilitated by something as simple as a sad story about a dog on the internet. The big reasons that I couldn't see myself as autistic was that I had this idea in my head that autistic people don't experience empathy. But when you're hyper-empathetic, like me, it's actually very much the opposite. The problem is that there are certain verbal and nonverbal cues that humans typically associate with someone who's being empathetic. And when you are hyper-empathetic, you are feeling what you believe someone to be feeling, and feeling it to a strong, debilitating extent. It means you can go nonverbal, you can have meltdowns, shutdowns, you can deflect with awkward, weird, dark humor, or most likely, you come back with a personal story in an attempt to relate. And because you have not given the signs of being empathetic, neurotypical people will assume that you do not have empathy. I don't know that there's a good solution for this. If there is, I certainly don't have one. I've worked it out to a fair extent in my own relationships, and I'm able to some extent to reflect a neurotypical empathy to my family and friends because I know that's important to them and they matter to me. It's a bigger problem for society at large, and it's a big barrier toward diagnosis or self-diagnosis. If you find yourself thinking you could be autistic, but you identify with the experience I talked about, being a hyper-empathetic person or a highly sensitive person, please do a little bit more research before you reject the notion of being autistic. Hey, future me. I'm glad this video ended up sitting in my drafts for a bit because I saw a comment from a mutual where he said that he feels like he does not experience empathy like a neurotypical, and he also does not experience it like a person with hyper-empathy would. He feels like he is at the lower end of the empathy spectrum. This dialogue we're having about hyperempathy doesn't always apply to him. And I just thought that was a good reminder that really all of the symptoms that we're dealing with are a spectrum. And there's sort of a narrow range where you can be neurotypical for a lot of things like empathy, and everything that falls outside of that can apply to someone with autism. This is the reason that there's just not a one-size-fits-all approach.